I didn't say it out loud at first. I let it live quietly inside me, like a private oath I wasn't ready to defend. Never love again. Not because love isn't beautiful, but because I finally understood how expensive it can be when given without protection. People think heartbreak is loud. They expect tears, breakdowns, dramatic goodbyes. But the kind that changes you most is silent. It's the moment you realize you don't recognize yourself anymore because you bent too far trying to keep something alive. I didn't lose love all at once. I lost it in small permissions. I permitted confusion. I permitted absence. I permitted inconsistency. I told myself love requires patience, and it does. But I confused patience with tolerance for pain. That's how it happens. No one wakes up and decides to stop believing in love. You arrive there slowly, through unanswered questions, through postponed conversations, through promises that never fully arrive. I remember the exact moment the thought appeared, not after an argument, not after a betrayal, after acceptance, acceptance that no matter how gently I loved, no matter how clearly I communicated, no matter how deeply I tried to understand, it still wasn't enough to make someone meet me where I stood. And that's when something hardened inside me. Not anger, not bitterness, caution, a deep, protective caution that said, I will never put myself here again. People romanticize vulnerability, they call it bravery, but no one talks about the cost of being open in a world that often takes without returning. I gave honesty, I gave patience, I gave benefit of the doubt, and slowly I watched myself become smaller. I stopped asking for clarity because I didn't want to seem demanding. I stopped expressing needs because I didn't want to appear needy. I stopped trusting my intuition because love told me to be understanding. That version of me believed love meant endurance. This version knows better. Love is not measured by how much pain you can survive. It's measured by how safe you feel being honest. When that safety disappears, love turns into labor. And I was exhausted. So when I said never love again, what I really meant was never abandon myself again, never negotiate my worth again, never explain away discomfort again. Never stay where effort is one sided again. I watched how love made me doubt my instincts, how it taught me to second guess clarity, how it convinced me that wanting consistency was asking for too much. That's not love. That's emotional erosion. You don't notice it while it's happening. It feels like compromise. It feels like maturity. Until one day you realize you're the only one adjusting. That's when love stops feeling expansive and starts feeling like confinement. I didn't become cold overnight. I became careful with my time, careful with my trust, careful with who gets access to my inner world, because access is not a right, it's a responsibility, and not everyone knows how to hold it. People will tell you not to close your heart, they'll warn you about becoming guarded, but no one warns you about what happens when you leave it unguarded for too long. You start confusing intensity with intimacy. You start calling uncertainty mystery. You start accepting crumbs because you remember how starving felt before. I don't want that anymore. I don't want love that needs decoding. I don't want affection that comes with conditions. I don't want connection that exists only when it's convenient. So, yes, I said never love again, but that's not entirely true. What I meant was I will never love unconsciously again. I will never love in ways that require me to disappear. I will never love someone's potential more than their presence. I will never love a version of someone that only exists in my hope. If love returns to my life, it will look different. It will be calm, not confusing, clear, not inconsistent, mutual, not negotiated. And if that kind of love never comes, I will still be whole, because loneliness with self respect is lighter than companionship that costs you your peace. I used to think being alone was the worst outcome. Now being emotionally alone with someone is far worse. So when I say never love again, don't hear bitterness, hear boundaries, hear growth, someone who learned the difference between longing and alignment. Love didn't fail me. I just stopped offering it where it couldn't survive. And this time I choose myself first. always. After I said it never love again, I expected to feel empty. Instead, I felt still, not numb, not relieved, just still like a room after a storm where nothing is broken anymore, but nothing is rearranged either. That stillness was unfamiliar because for a long time my heart had been loud, always reaching, always reacting, always hoping something would finally land and stay. Silence felt unnatural at first. I caught myself wanting to fill it, scrolling, replaying memories, imagining conversations that would never happen. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't miss the person as much as I missed the version of myself that believed love would save me. There's a grief that comes when you outgrow a belief, not a relationship, a belief. The belief that love fixes wounds, that if you give enough, someone will eventually see you fully, that endurance equals devotion. Letting go of that belief felt like letting go of innocence, and innocence doesn't leave quietly. It argues, it bargains, it reminds you of moments that felt real even if they weren't sustainable. But I stayed still. I let the urge pass, and slowly something shifted. I started noticing how much emotional energy I had been spending just maintaining hope. Hope is beautiful, but it's also expensive when it's one sided. Without that constant emotional labor, my days felt lighter, not happier, lighter. I laughed without thinking about who I'd tell later. I made decisions without wondering how they'd be received. I rested without guilt, and that's when I understood peace doesn't arrive loudly, it settles. People ask, don't you get lonely? Of course I do. Loneliness doesn't disappear when you choose yourself, but it changes shape. Before, loneliness felt like rejection. Now it feels like space, space to hear myself think, space to feel without performing, space to exist without explaining. I realize how often I had been editing myself in love, softening opinions, delaying reactions, holding back truths, all in the name of harmony. But harmony that requires silence isn't harmony, it's suppression. I don't want a love that needs me quieter than I am. I don't want a connection that only works if I keep my needs small and manageable. So when someone new shows interest now, I notice things I used to ignore. Do they listen or just wait to speak? Do they show consistency or just intensity? Do they respect boundaries or test how flexible they are? I don't rush answers anymore. Urgency used to feel romantic. Now it feels suspicious because anything real doesn't need to be forced into existence. It grows or it doesn't. I've also stopped explaining my past in ways that make others comfortable. I don't minimize the hurt. I don't joke it away. I don't pretend it was nothing because it wasn't nothing. It taught me discernment, and discernment looks like distance to people who benefit from your openness. That's okay. Not everyone deserves access to the softer parts of you. Some people are meant to meet you at the surface and stay there. I no longer feel the need to prove that I'm capable of love. I know am. What I'm careful about now is proving that I'm capable of walking away. That used to terrify me. Now it feels like strength. If love comes again, I won't meet it with desperation. I'll meet it with presence. And if it asks me to betray my peace, my values, or my clarity, I'll recognize that as my answer. Because love that costs you, your center is not love, it's a negotiation you keep losing. So, no, this isn't a sad ending. It's a pause, a recalibration, a chapter where I learned that choosing myself doesn't mean closing my heart, it means guarding it wisely. I didn't stop believing in love. I stopped believing that love requires sacrifice of self, and that belief alone has already changed everything. Something strange happens after you choose yourself long enough. You stop waiting, not in a dramatic, bitter way, but in a quiet, settled way where your nervous system finally believes you are safe. I didn't notice it immediately. It showed up in small moments. I stopped checking my phone when it was quiet. I stopped rereading old conversations looking for meaning that wasn't there. I stopped imagining parallel realities where things turned out differently. The past slowly lost its grip, not because it stopped mattering, but because it stopped directing me. For a long time, love had been my compass. Every decision bent toward connection. Every silence felt like a problem to solve. Now the compass had shifted inward, and that terrified me at first, because when you're not orienting yourself around someone else, you're forced to face questions you can't outsource. What do I want when no one is watching? What do I need when no one is asking? Who am I without being chosen? Those questions don't come with quick answers. They sit with you, they wait, and waiting without distraction is uncomfortable. I started noticing how often I had used love as a distraction from myself, not intentionally, not manipulatively,